Okay, welcome, my dear friends, and apologies for the delayed start. I hope that you are okay and keeping safe. And please do take good care of yourselves, especially during this time when we are contending with the COVID-19 pandemic. I am praying that you are all well. I am positive and trusting God that God will heal if we, the Bible says, if we pray and cry out to Him, He will definitely heal our land. So I do hope and therefore wish you good safety, yourselves and your families. I do, and thank you very much for tuning in. I do want to run this series, which are based on my new book, Drenched, in the Name of Love, and which I am hoping that if you have not yet got yourself a copy of this book, that you will indeed get your copy of the book Drenched. Now, when I actually thought, and I was writing this book, I thought of a title which that will aptly convey the message that I wanted to convey. Yes, Sawubona Zama, and thank you very much for tuning in, and also others that are joining. Thank you very much for those that are joining. So I thought of a title that will well define the issue of relationships, and relationships are one area that can really take you to the pinnacle of happiness, and drench you in a downpour of emotions, and therefore I thought of this title, Drenched, in the Name of Love, which really is a title that actually indicates the as I say, the relationships. I wanted a name because the word drenched itself denotes something that is thoroughly wet, soaked, and this is how relationships tend to have us soaked. And I think that most of us can really relate to the feeling of being drenched, a feeling of being left high and dry in one way or the other, and where we find ourselves in a whirlwind of emotions, where we actually left hurt, angry, disappointed, and even confused, and therefore drenched in pain. So all of us, most of us, can actually relate to that. And I often say that most of the life altering moments come with the area of relationships. And I do know that often we focus on the negative side of relationships, but there is a side, again, that really is about relationships as God helping us, using them as a vehicle for us, even to grow. And have you been in a situation where you say that where you come out, a better person, even stronger, even in emotional intelligence? And often, they are also used, if there are things that need to be broken in us, and the things that need to die in us, and death is never is always painful, and therefore when we go through those moments, we do suffer pain and all of that. But one thing that which I think is a message that is also in the book, is that which you often have to have a responsibility for, is to refuse to be in one place for far too long, is to refuse to stagnate. Stagnation is the beginning of death. Is to refuse to actually to make a permanent abode in what was meant to be a campsite. Is to refuse to find ourselves worshiping the experience when God has more for us. I am reminded and it's something that is there in my first book, Yesterday I Cried, where I actually relate to an experience where the servant of God Samuel was actually mourning the death of Saul, and God asked him a question: how long will you mourn for that which I have rejected? In the sense that often we tend to overly mourn that which God has not approved in our lives, and at some point, and so the challenge is always to be moving on. The challenge is always that as you go through an experience, be able to move on. And I always, and the point also that I'm making in the book is that most of the turning points in our lives are foregrounded in our thinking. They are predicated in what goes on in our minds, and it is us therefore who really become key players in creating environment for turning points in our lives. And it begins by us changing the way in which we think. There is also an episode that the Bible relates where it talks about men with leprosy in the Bible, and they were faced with they evaluated their option, and they were starving in death. These are men that were rejected, that were a group of outcasts that were left to live in the periphery by the community there, and nobody wanted to associate with them. And therefore they were beginning to they were starving to death, and they began to have a discussion amongst themselves. And I like how they phrased the question as they were weighing their options, and they asked a question: why should we sit here until we die? And I think it's a question that I think is pertinent even to all of us, to often I ask ourselves, but why do we sit in this environment when there could be we could take action and move on, and some of the breakthroughs in our lives are just dependent on you taking that one step of faith. Some of the breakthroughs, they're just you taking just that one step of faith, instead of really being confined to so the question that I'd really like to ask us as we engage on this session is really, how long is that why sit there until you die? And what I like about these men is that they looked beyond their impurity, they looked beyond their disgrace, and they took an option when they actually decided then to say, look, because there are two options, either to go to the city, but then they decided, no, if we go to the city, there is no food in the city. The other option that they had was to go to the camp of the enemy, the Syrians. And but they reckoned, no, if we go there, our enemies will attack us and will perish. But they thought, look, if we die, we die. We may as well go there. Lo and behold, when they actually arrived at the enemy's camp, they found that God had actually orchestrated a miracle such that the enemies had actually fled. And in the process of fleeing, and there was so much, and they left so much food, and they had actually had a feast in such a manner that they actually needed to go and announce to the to their people to say, please come, because there's so much food here. But it all linked to a decision that they took to move on. Now, and therefore it is for us also to look beyond our current circumstances, to look beyond the situation that we may be in now, understanding that the best is yet to come, understanding that God has better things for us other than the experiences that we have actually gone through. I always say it is better to die striving than to come to accept your situation. There are people, even with their confessions, even in what they say, they accept, they've come to accept that my condition will always be like this, at home, this is, but the more you actually confess that, is the more you immortalize what you are supposed to be rejecting. Ours is to continue, and often we find ourselves even going through a cycle of pain. It's not for us to embrace the cycle. It is for us to say, look, as much as I've recognized this cycle in my life, but it stops with me right here and now, so that we strive. We actually strive, even if it means that we die trying, then accepting our status quo. And as I close, it always boils down to what I think, and often what makes us to actually spend more time than we are supposed to in the morning valley is because there are nagging questions and things that are busy, haunting us in our minds. And this is what I call, the skeletons that haunt us, to the extent that they even make us to sabotage our new or potential relationships. And I say, the point that I'm making in the book is that unless you deal with those skeletons, those things will come haunting you. Now, and often our challenge is about, wanting to find closure. And the point that I'm making is that it is okay to find, after all, we all want closure. If we go through experiences, we want closure. And there are experiences that when we go through, indeed, as we maybe because of the relationship breakdown, we find ourselves, engaging nicely and perhaps still become friends with whoever that we in a relationship with. But life does not always offer that. And you find that if therefore you don't have the closure that you wanted, you find that you live with nagging questions. emotions. You find that you'll never be able to be at peace. You find that you are forever in this jail cell. And this is why in the book, the point I'm making is that we need to differentiate between the closure you want and the closure you need. And the point I'm making also is that the closure you need is within you. It's not outside of you. So often we look outside for redemption, whereas it is within us. It is within us to say, no, this I'm actually to, and that is actually foregrounded in us releasing those that we have held in our hearts. And often, what makes us to be, stuck and even holding negative sentiments with those that actually hurt us is the fact that we have not forgiven them. And one of the things that we're really making in the book is actually to, when we don't release people in our hearts, there's something I say, we allow them to rent, a space in our hearts for free. There are people who just stay in our hearts for free. And they become like a sharp nail that keeps smiting you in your heart, because and they become toxic, because any day whatever you do, you always think about them. So essentially they actually keep you arrested, they lock you in a jail, and they actually have the keys with them. And the point I'm making is that often we really give people too much power that we are supposed to be. No one owes to have you jailed. No one has to have that power where you are now, your livelihood, your happiness is dependent on them. Your happiness is not dependent on any person. Your happiness is dependent on you. And therefore forgiving them is another way of actually making a point that we actually begin to be set free, and to begin to get our power back, to reclaim our power. And again, forgiveness is not like reconciliation. Reconciliation is when you actually you sit down and you talk, but reconciliation is you forgive people as they still hurting you. You forgive people who have not apologized. You forgive people who don't see anything wrong with what they did. That is what true forgiveness is all about. And forgiveness is more beneficial to the one doing the forgiving than the one that is being forgiven. And therefore, hence I thought I'll start with this today, as we start this series of saying the important thing is to free your heart, and making the point that no one rents a space in your heart. I would like to leave it at there now, friends. And I do want to also indicate, I'm sure you may have heard, I'm actually honored that I was actually nominated as in the category of the best male author in the Book Behind Awards. And I would like to invite you, if you have not yet voted, please do. I really request of your support in voting for us. In this, all you need to do is to send a message to number 34877, and you simply type the message TBBA BMA 92. It's TBBA BMA 92. So please grab that phone and vote. We're counting. We do want to bring this award home, and we are counting on you for your votes. So thank you very much for tuning in and for listening. Please do like and comment on this post, and please do share. And I'm looking forward to again meeting with you in our next session, and God richly bless you. Thank you very much.